Well, welcome to my cellar. Let's see, this is 159. Who'd have thought? All those years ago. All right. Let's get right into it. I have several pages worth of things to talk about tonight or answer questions to answer. So we'll start off right away. And some of them are just comments. First was just a comment. My father taught me to play AD&D when I was young, and it's still my preferred version. I've tried more modern games as my friends want to check them out. But when I DM, it's AD&D, which is most of the time. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think all of us hold a certain fondness for the first game, even if it's not the one we still play. I mean, you may have started something else and then discovered the true game, D&D, AD&D. I think we all hold a certain fondness for the one we learned on, especially if there's good vibes, good memories involved. Okay, if there is time. Okay, this is this was loaded onto here by one of the people that played in my game Monday night. I had 5 guys from Canada, Ontario, as I recall, I think. And we got to talking for a little while after the game was over. And they wanted to know about psionics, and I took the blame. When I got to TSR, I told Gary I thought that there was a grotesque imbalance in that player characters had no defense against the Mind Flayer, which I believe came out. It was either, yeah, I believe it was, it came out while I was still at school. And there was the Thought Eater and the Intellect Devourer and the Brain Mole. And yeah, I don't know. Not all of them were there right then, but you get the gist. There was these monsters that could screw with your beta waves or whatever. And there was no defense against it. And Gary and I were both fans of Doctor Strange, the comic. And if you look in some of the spells, you'll see that they come straight out of Doctor Strange, the Silver Thread and astral travel and all that. Those are straight out of Doctor Strange. And so I came up with a psionics system. It was supposed to be the rarest of rare traits among humans and only slightly less rare amongst other races. And we knew at the time when we put it out that it wouldn't be treated that way. And sure enough, everybody and their brother was psionic. And it was a difficult system to buy into and to train up and everything. And people soon got disenchanted with it and thought, oh, that sucks. But there was actually a method there that maybe if you rolled up 200 characters, you might have one that had a chance to be psionic or to have latent psionic abilities. And that's all it was. It was trying to level the playing field against mind flayers, which scared the shit out of anybody with a brain. 3 of the scariest monsters I know of: mind flayers, beholders, and boulets. And if they don't scare you, they should. And I know there's a whole lot of other monsters that have been invented, and I haven't bothered to read up on most of them and don't really care because I don't really need them. I don't need, a monster of the week. Probably because I don't run a campaign. But even if I did run a campaign, that's not the way Gary, that's not the way Rob, that's not the way Dave, it's not the way Jim Ward when he was doing it. That's not the way we play. We didn't need a flavor of the week. But anyway, have you ever pitted characters against dangerous, prolonged environmental challenges, such as storms at sea, avalanches, or wildfires? If not, how would you do it? Yeah, well, yeah, sort of. In my Arredondo adventure that we published, you were faced with a long um, pole up a river that's got treacherous sandbars. It's got treacherous denizens. It's got big caimans, and it's got giant frogs, and it's got other things. And it's going to take you 3 or 4 days to make it up there. There's carnivorous apes, and there's wild ones, there's trained ones. So yeah, and it's been my experience that even though I thought I did it pretty well, people don't want to spend a lot of time outdoors. They want to be somewhere fighting. But I don't really let that influence me too much. It was a tough slog. They had to be careful where they tied up along the bank or on a sandbar or whatever at night, so that the strangler vines didn't come down the cliffs. So there were many places where they could meet their end outdoors, all having to do with the flora and the fauna of a tropical rainforest type environment. I've never done anything about storms at sea or trying to run a wildfire or anything like that. It's just not ever come up on anything I did. I said before, I haven't run that many extended campaigns, and I've not written anything that would feature one of those, though I have written one or two that take place in the frozen north. And so there are issues to deal with there with cold and exposure. But unless they're really unlucky, they won't face much of that. I've been looking at some newer digital magazines and realize that I miss the advertisements. Those weird and wonderful companies that sold miniatures and accessories. Just send $1 or $2 to a post office box for a full 60-page catalog. Yeah, I'd like to see you be able to get a 60-page catalog today for $2. Um, I think an RPG magazine is lesser for not having some of those advertisements. I'm not sure why. Perhaps they break up the formatting and give me something to cleanse the eyeballs. They certainly gave me another reason to go back and look at the publication again. Well, yeah, and you have it there. A be back factor. You'll be back to look at that again later. Um, you aren't going to see those today. There aren't enough companies that can afford to do digital advertising without a proven business method that it's going to give them anything, any kind of a return. You won't find $2 catalogs anymore, especially 60 pages, 5 or 8 maybe dollars. And I'm pedantic once in a while, and I know that they're called a digital magazine, but I don't call it a magazine. I'm sorry, magazines have physical substance. I don't choose to. It's not a magazine. And I've talked before about why it's not practical to even try to publish a magazine today and hope to make any profits. Glad to hear you got the jab. Yep, I have had my first one. The potion of protection. Hope my state follows through with the booster shot too. Stay safe. Actually, yeah, Ohio's doing pretty good, and our healthcare, our HMO, took care of us. My wife's worked with that corporation for over 30 years and has been retired for several. But they got us in almost immediately when our age group was eligible, so I can't complain. In In the past, you mentioned wargaming on a sand table. What rules did you play with, and what got you started in wargaming? Have you ever written your own rules? I never got to play on a sand table until, good golly, Lake Geneva. What we played on in college was we had table coverings, green felt or yellow felt or whatever, and we used styrofoam underneath it to make contours, or we spread it out and we stacked the styrofoam up to make hills, and blue construction paper to make paper, whatever. See, you use this question uses the phrase wargaming, and I've been a wargamer since I was in the 6th grade, but those were board games. I didn't get into miniatures until college because I knew about them. I just had never known anybody that had any. Oh, and as a quick aside, I watched this really interesting, fun British comedy crime drama on Netflix. It's on Prime, called New Tricks. And last night's episode, it took place with a war games convention in England on the small. Yeah, it was great. Cheryl was sitting there going, "Yeah, I'll bet you love it." I go, "Yeah, I do. I love this." Anyway, and so I was exposed to first exposed to miniatures in college, and then there was a sand table that had just been deconstructed when I got up there. So I built my own the first year I was up there. I got the infrastructure of an engine bench out of an old Oldsmobile dealership. So I mean, my legs were like 6x6s, and the two cross beams on each side were like 4x4s. I mean, it was made to hold engines. And so then I built ellipse around the area, walls around the edge, and lined it with plastic, and filled it with sand, lined it with plastic so that I could spray it with water and sculpt terrain. So I really got a lot of experience on my own sand table that I dreamed of having for several years. I mostly played with Dave Trempier, and we mostly played armor miniatures with a set of WRG rules. And I played chainmail a little bit. I didn't have a lot of the figures for the period for chainmail. We played, what else did we play? Well, over at Lake Geneva, we played classic warfare and swords and spells. Playtesting, basically. Classic warfare didn't need to be playtested nearly as extensively as swords and spells should have been. Have I ever written my own rules? No, the closest I came was in the last or second to the last adventure gaming. I wrote a set of charts for use with percentile dice for randomly generating scenarios on the Eastern Front in the last 9 months of the war. So you didn't have to have a referee to build the scenario and everything. You could just roll dice and be surprised by what the other guy had. And I did an extensive research period on it. And so naturally, the Germans are hopelessly outnumbered almost all the time. But, well, no, I shouldn't say hopelessly, but outnumbered. What do I think of the works of fantasy fiction novel writer Stephen R. Donaldson? What especially do I think of fantasy or sci-fi theme of characters being transported or teleported from some realm reality into an alternate fantasy world section? And Thomas Covenant, the Unbeliever, is heavy on that theme. Well, and were any of my peers or coworkers into that theme or genre? Gary and I were both fans of the Harold Shea novels. I reprinted a Harold Shea short story, um, and in the magazine. It's an interesting concept, but to be honest, the 5 years that I was there, we didn't have much time to go genre mashing. We were designing products in each of those individual genres. We were not trying to see how they'd mash together. That comes later when your sales lag and you have to come up with new ways to spark interest in your product. It's in the fish out of water thing. Good grief. It's been, it depends on the author how well they do it. Um, okay, here. Didn't George MacDonald write about goblins having no toes? Which is a great idea as they collect the toes of adventurers if captured. Well, I have no idea if George MacDonald wrote that goblins didn't have any toes, so I challenge the proposition. If they're a bipedal mammal, perhaps even a bipedal avian species, but a mammal, you can't walk flat-footed without toes. You can walk like a duck, but you need toes. You need toes to flex and bend. Even animalistic bipeds, goblins and that, they have long claws. And usually claws require a knuckle just for the claws. So I don't know why on earth he would think that they didn't have toes. Hey, if you want toeless goblins in your world, I don't mind. The sci-fi spaceship reference you made me think of giving an honorable mention to Gary's famous module, the S3 Expedition to the Barrier Peaks. What did you think of it? I never played it. I believe that came out after I was there. Did I ever read it? No, I didn't ever read it. There was a time when I still make a point of not reading other people's modules because I still have something I want to create. And I don't want to ever be accused of knowingly or even unknowingly picking up something out of somebody else's product, somebody else's storyline. So I don't. Here's some satisfied customers. Big shout out to you and your wheel of blame. Thanks so much from the fathers and the sons. A blast of a night. Yeah, I had two dads and their three sons, all grown ups, in Canada, and we did have a really good time. They got Wheel of Blame 2.0. I have tinkered with the format, and the basic concept is still the same, but now from adventure to encounter, you could be underground, you could be above ground, you could be underwater. Doesn't have to make sense. DM rules, sounding like a priggish dick. Take a page from poker. At the table, shuffle the dice while calling out the rules. Saving throws high, attack rolls low. Goblins are milkless. No dream spells, and healing is wild. But even though it's old school D&D had too many rules to call out, like a poker hand styles, or does it? Yeah, you can't. I would not, even if I spent 3 weeks thinking of all the variations on the way I play the game from rules as written. I certainly wouldn't present anybody with them. The big important ones, okay, about trust. I think is the biggest one about trust and rolling your own dice and whatever. And okay, if it rolls off the table, you got to roll it again. Yeah, they have to be rolled where somebody else can see them. Whatever satisfies the group ethic so that everybody knows that everybody's playing on the same level. That's fine. As I talked about last time, set down money, a value, a value system of what your money will get you. How much is a horse? There was in the original rule book, there were tables of what this kind of stuff would cost. That's as good a place as any to start. And if you think it's too high because your value system, your monetary system is lower, less inflated, then make it according. If you could have a magic item in real life, which would you take and why? I'd want a little carved box that each morning would have 5 brand new Krugerrands. And tomorrow morning it would have 5. And that's because I would take them out. And the next morning I would have 5 more. And with what the price of gold is going for right now, yeah, I wouldn't attract a lot of attention. Yeah, I think I'd like that. Okay, not quite the same as, oh, yeah, okay. Not quite the same as spell dreaming, but I did have an incident in one of my games where a gnome mage got high on wood elf armpit feathers, whole other story, and nearly killed some onlookers as they shot off a prepared lightning bolt due to the vivid hallucinations. The wood elves, having heard of gnomes' proclivity for illusions, got the mage high hoping to see a light show, and instead had one of their huts torched. And then there was a reply or a comment on this. Now that is how you build a world. I mean, hallucinogenic, hallucinogenic elf armpit feathers. Genius. And I can only concur. Uh, I, I don't claim anything as brilliant as this, but I love doing weird stuff like that and taking them down the primrose path. Yeah, I kind of touch on this a little later on another topic about sort of the thought processes behind this. The Vancium magic paradigm. You got me there for not having read Jack Vance. Wanted to for a long time, but couldn't find any. Managed to get 2 from the Dying Earth series today. Looking forward to reading them. Well, good. I hope I'll hear from you after you've read them and thought about them a little while. And one thing in defense of all us old timers is how little of this kind of stuff we had to pick and choose from. And his ion stones and his magic system were just really stellar examples in a not very big field, which is not to say that they weren't what we thought were very good, or we would have made up our own. I'm sure Gary would have made up his own. Some things dreams just can't replicate from the real world as it were. And this is game logic we're dealing with here, not philosophy of made up fictional properties like math. Okay. And the TM has to draw the line somewhere and because they say so is really the only law. And he would deal with dream spells by having them transport them to a dream realm. Okay, you can have months worth of side adventures there if they're all going. All right. How about a magic weapon with 2 properties? Say +1 damage, and with a more interesting but less reliable second effect like magic missile or fireball. Second property could be limited by charges or difficult gesture move, affects the PC's round and turn placement, or activates upon success. The blade tastes blood, or the PC rolls a particularly good attack. Do you have any other suggestions for limitations, like a chicken liver sacrifice or a recharge? I kind of like the idea of an opponent having to make both a melee and a saving throw from one attack, but I would definitely limit how many times that could happen. Well, there's certainly no reason why you couldn't get a magic item more than one ability or more than one skill. You could certainly do it with an amulet or a particularly vivid set stone in a ring or something. We're already giving it two abilities if you stop and think about it. If it's a +1 sword, well, then we're giving it +1 to hit, and we're also giving it +1 on the damage. But semantics aside, another skill beyond that, sure. I think a sword could have some really interesting stuff put in there with just a few uses. I think you might have a little bit of difficulty so that the wielder knew that it only had so many uses and didn't just burn it out willy-nilly. Maybe not so much how many uses, but if it's a particularly potent second effect, only once, and then it doesn't get that power back for 12 or 18 or 48 hours or whatever. As to, have a limited number of charges and then it's gone. Yeah, but that kind of cheapens the coolness of the weapon, right? You find this neat magical weapon that's plus damage and plus to hit, and it charms. But then it doesn't charm anymore. Of course, that would be a side quest, a side quest for the owner to go find somebody that could renew the charges. So, it certainly presents possibilities for gameplay. Okay, now this is an interesting statement that I'm beginning to agree with based on what anecdotal evidence I'm being presented with. The current edition made spellcasters overpowered. What is stopping them from taking control and enslaving the world? Wasn't that what Gary did his best to prevent? Yes, that is what Gary did his best to prevent. And this isn't the first time that I've heard this. What the hell happened? I believe that the people currently churning out product for Wizards and Hasbro are paying way too much attention to the marketing assholes. We need a game that appeals to this. We need a game that appeals to that. We need a game. And not paying enough attention to the game designers, game writers, if they even have any of those now. The game developers are just making what the marketing people say will sell, I guess. All this woke and cancel crap and changing the balance of the game, putting all these idiot, lists as long as your arm of skills and abilities. And I guess they got new terminology for knacks. Or I think what you're seeing the result of all that idiocy. All those chickens come home to roost. Game doesn't feel like what it felt like when we started out. Now everybody starts out all buffed up. Where's the struggle? But hey, what do I know? I'm just an old timer. Okay. Talking about being a DM. I was given a birthday present last month. I believe it was my birthday. I know who gave it to me. So this neato dice bag that's got a drawstring top and pockets and everything, and it clips over your belt if you want, though I'm a little old for that. But what it says on there, the dice giveth, and the dice taketh away. Let's talk about that for a minute. It could be said, a case could be made successfully. Then in the early days, in many ways, we early DMs were no better than squat, hairy, brutish Cro-Magnons, clad in furs, scratching the fleas and reading the cracks on the sheep shoulders that were thrown into the fire to divine the future or get an answer. Because everything we did was around the dice. And when it wasn't, did you hit it? How bad did you get hit? How bad did you hit it? It was when we were out there in freeform land. You're going to try what? Okay. Roll against your dex -2. Or, oh yeah, roll me a 20. And then determine as they're getting ready to roll that they need that they're looking to go high or they're looking to go low already. Then let them roll and then let them see how far off. If if they need to roll low and they roll a 3 on a 20, great. If they roll an 18, well, that really didn't work out very well, did it? And we made decisions like that on the fly all the time. There wasn't a rule for it. We just make up a die roll. What do the dice say? We already live and fall by the roll and final positioning of the dice as it is. You roll that 20 and you hit him and you killed him. You roll that 20 and you missed and he hit you and you die. How badly did you get hit? Roll for damage. How badly did you hit him? Roll for damage. Drink this potion. How much better do you feel? Roll a dice. We already live and die on the roll of the dice. We used to interpret the rolls of the dice. Before there were such things as skills, when we were first playing, somebody decided they were going to be the, 5 guys in the group, and the second one that tries actually picks the lock. So the next time there's a lock, he said, well, okay, I did it last time, let me do it. And if he did it again, well, then most DMs at that point are going to go, oh, okay, and they're going to recognize him, and they're going to start giving him some skill advantages from having successfully done that without going up a level. And we let the dice decide. That's why I like rolling dice. That's why I don't care for dice generators, digital generators. For a while, I was into the dragon bone, but I knew the people that made it. I understood the electronic technology of how it was made, and I believed it to be random. And that's all we're looking for is a random number. But I went back to dice because I like to roll them. I like to drop them down the tower. Okay, let's see. Tomorrow's Valentine's Day. Okay, in 2 weeks, I'll be running 2 games for Total Confusion Gaming Con. One's a freebie and one's for charities, so there's a token fee to play in it. Then in 3.5 weeks, I'll be running some games. I'll be running 4 games at GaryCon. And those will be whatever your GaryCon badge entitles you to. No added. Though there is one of my games that they designated after the fact is some premium level in that it's only available for people that have the poshest ticket, I guess. I don't know. Wasn't anything I was consulted with. But it's cool. It's going to get crazy here in the next 3 days. My email's down because my computer's shitting on me. And I have a brand new one sitting over there on the end of the pool table that I have to hook up this weekend. And I don't have the foggiest idea how to do any of this crap. So I'm going to get this published and start taking everything apart tomorrow and putting the new stuff in there and try to go from there. I have to learn a new Windows 10, and I've been a 7 player all this time. So you may not hear from me for a few days afterwards, getting everything back online. Comments on tonight's topics, questions you want answered, you know where it goes, in the comments afterwards. See, did I cover everything? I guess I have. Play online if you have to. Come play with me. I'm running games whenever 4 to 7 people want to get together. I'll run a game for you. And I've gone to Wheel of Blame 2.0, and you might, as you'll hear from the guys that played on Monday, it's even more amped up than it was before. We had a guy get decapitated. So I think about 2/3 of the group came out below fully healed. They all came out beat up, but they all ended up coming out because thanks to the universal antidote, the other guy got his head stuck back on. But wear double masks now. They're recommending 1 paper, 1 cloth. I do it anyway, even though I got a shot. I'm not gonna think anything beyond safe until 2 weeks after the second one. Cough in your elbow, wash your hands, stay safe. Dodati Govi. Oh, hello. I'm still figuring out when this thing starts. Welcome to my cellar.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Last man around when them rates went down. Called in Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought Psionics to the game to attack that wizard brain. ESR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Tight with tramp under a tree, high as could be.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Curmudgeon.